Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today on this episode, it's March. So let's talk about 4 baits that you need to be throwing in March. And yes, you can throw a wide variety of different baits in March. You can throw everything that you've got in your boat and probably get bit with it. But these are 4 different baits, different bait categories that I have a lot of success consistently all around the country every single year in March. So that's why I want to show you these 4 different baits. Before we get started, let's talk about like what's going on in March. You know, what is going on with the fish that makes me want to reach for these particular baits. So essentially in March for most of the country, and I'm sorry if I'm leaving the northern states out of this, because I know March is still a very, very cold month for you guys. But for most of the country, I would say there's a lot of warm weather spells that we've got in March. So it may not be consistently warm and sunny and beautiful like it is today. In fact, it was actually pretty cold when I got here. So it may not be nice all throughout March, but you're gonna start seeing those warming trends, those weeks where, you know, things are in the 70s and the water temps start creeping into the low 60s. And when you start seeing that, that means that the fish are going to be either up shallow and starting to spawn, or they're going to be thinking about it and positioning themselves in areas right next to those spawning areas. And a lot of times during the March, there seems to be a big difference between, you know, the smaller size class of fish, which is the male bucks that are up real shallow and looking for spawning areas, and those females that are much larger, you know, the 4+ pound class fish that are much larger, and they're just kind of waiting. You know, they're patiently waiting. They're not as like quick to hit the banks and start spawning as the male bass are. They want to see very consistent warm weather a lot of the times. Again, these are generalities, but this is what I see every single year to a certain degree. So that's what's happening. So these baits that I'm going to show you are really catering to that scenario, that situation that we're dealing with, those staging fish. So the first bait is really a good one to start in early March, or when maybe, you know, you just haven't seen those real dramatic warm trends, and the water temps are still kind of like in the high 50s. This is a really, really good bait for that type of situation, and that is a jerkbait. So jerkbait, there's a lot of different great jerkbaits out there, and I'm actually going to put a lot of the selections that I like in the description below. And so I'm not bogging down everything with all the tackle that I use for every single bait. I'm just going to go ahead and write all of the gear that I use for each of these baits in the description below, along with some affiliate links that you guys can use if you're looking to buy this stuff. So keep that in mind. That's why I'm not mentioning it here. So check below for all that. But a jerkbait is really good this time of year, and really the scenario that I like to fish a jerkbait in is looking for those staging areas, okay? And not to like oversimplify finding staging areas, but like a scenario that is really, really good this time of year is for most, even natural lakes, but mostly for reservoirs. Every single spawning pocket or spawning bay is going to have some deeper water side of the pocket. You know, you're going to have a side of a pocket or a creek where the creek channel swings in towards the side of the shoreline, which means that it's a little bit deeper than the opposite side, the more gradual sloping side. And those type of situations where you've got a creek channel, you know, coming and butting up against a shoreline very close to spawning habitat, that's where a jerkbait is going to be really, really good, especially those 45-degree banks. You know, you can cast it to like lay down trees, the ends of lay down trees, and work it past cover like that. You can also fish it above vegetation. So if I'm in an area that leading into the back of this spawning area got a lot of vegetation that grows maybe 4 foot below the surface, that's a really good scenario to throw a jerkbait, because a jerkbait, realistically, most jerkbaits are going to get down to 4 foot zone, and that's where they're going to work best. Some a little bit deeper, some a little bit shallower. But if you have grass that's just starting to grow off the bottom, that's a really good time to throw a jerkbait over it. So look for those staging areas and you know, that are very close to spawning areas, but that have slightly deeper water, and a jerkbait is going to be a really good tool for that. All right, the next category of baits that that I like to throw in March is actually, you know, a category of lure that really seems to stand out this time of year. You know, jerkbait and the other baits I'm going to be talking about, you can fish them all year round and have a lot of success with them. And this category of baits, also you can have success throughout the year, but it seems like March and early April, these are just absolute killers. And what I'm talking about are swim baits. Okay, and the reason why I'm kind of focusing in on a category of baits as opposed to specific baits is because there's a lot of great swim baits out there. There's also a lot of terrible swim baits out there. Some of the ones that I really like, though, this one right here is actually quickly becoming one of my favorite larger profile swim baits. Okay, this is the new Zman MULLETRON LT, and the LT stands for line through. It's got this very unique line through system. Where you've got the single hook that locks in place. I mean, it locks. It doesn't rock from side to side. And you know, the line goes through. You tie it to the hook. And I love this because it doesn't have a treble hook on the bottom. A lot of the line through baits and similar, you know, type of swim baits have a line through system or a treble hook on the bottom, whether or not they have a line through system, and that tends to snag on cover. This one right here with the hook on the top and the hook not rolling from side to side, it comes through cover very well. And this bait doesn't roll. It doesn't have like a real heavy roll to it. It has a real nice saunter because of that wedge tail design that was really popular with like Huddleston swim baits back on the West Coast. So this is a really good one. I like this one for just getting, you know, bigger than average size bites, but it's not a high percentage type size. You know, like I'm not going to catch a ton of fish on it. So when I'm trying to catch more fish, you know, and just get as many bites as I possibly can, and hopefully I can catch some larger than average fish, you know, you can go to a more conservative swim bait option, something a little bit smaller, between the 5-inch and 4.5-inch range. These are two really good choices. The Zman diesel minnows, the 5-inch version, is one of my favorites for just, you know, chunking and winding, just covering water during March and April. Right now I've got it rigged with the tush hook from Core Tackle. That's a really cool presentation, creates a little bit more of rocking action. Another way that I traditionally have fished it a lot as well, where did I put it? Oh, there it is with a WRM 958, which is a belly weighted swim bait hook and EWG design that makes it weedless. So you can fish that with something like the diesel minnows or any other, you know, small, you know, moderate size swim bait. That's going to work really well. And then, you know, if you're fishing a lake that traditionally the bait fish are on the smaller side, you can fish something like a 4.5-inch. This is the MULLETRON, not the LT, but the MULLETRON. And I've got it on the ZWG weighted hook from Z-Man. So swim baits are a really, really good option this time of year. I don't know the exact reason. I can make guesses as to why fish love swim baits most during this time of year, like the immediate pre-spawn right before they go up to spawn. I think it has a lot to do with them just looking for bigger meals, you know, to prepare for the very exhausting spawning process. But I also just think that it's a time of year where you know, shatter and bait fish are just getting more active, and so I think that the fish are just reacting to these baits a little bit more. But swim baits are really, really good this time of year, and especially around wood. I like to throw swim baits in and around laydowns and hard cover, and sometimes I'll throw them around docks too. So those are the areas where I tend to get the bigger bites overall. But swim baits are definitely a category of bait that you do not want to ignore in March, for sure. All right, so the next category of baits is gonna be a swim jig. And as you can see, this one is pretty sorry. It's tore up. You know, if it wasn't for this hand-tied skirt, I don't think the skirt would be there anymore. The whole bottom has been chewed up, and that's because I've just been flat out catching them. Now, albeit I've been catching mostly small bucks, but because we've had days like this where they've started to move up and start looking for areas to make their beds, but it's been a lot of fun. A swim jig is one of the best options for covering water and catching a ton of fish, and not just, you know, smaller fish. It catches a bunch of big ones too when those bigger ones start to move up as well. But a swim jig is going to be a really good option in March for real shallow water. So when you start getting those sunny days, you know, the water temps start to get into the low 60s, the swim jig should be one of the first things that you reach for, because it's going to be efficient. You're going to be able to fish around all different types of cover, and it also just has the perfect you know, profile to imitate bluegill, which I think is really important during the spring, because bluegill are just such a nuisance for bass during the spawn, and it's also a very prevalent type of forage species as well. So it's a really good bluegill imitation, but don't neglect to also try some shad patterns. If you're seeing a lot of shad in an area, you know, try both of them. The swim jigs that I like to throw usually are like a 1/4 ounce or 3/8 ounce. I like 2 different trailers for a swim jig this time of year. The first one is going to be something that really imitates a bluegill a little bit more, or a crawfish, you know, depending on how you like to orient the trailer. And that is the Zman Goat. Something like this is going to have a lot of action, a lot of swimming action. It's got a wider profile, so it kind of gives that bluegill profile, that, you know, tall body profile. And I just love that trailer, man. It works really, really well. And sometimes I'll put it horizontal to more or less imitate crawfish, or if I'm fishing really, really shallow, like a foot, you know, type shallow, which helps it kind of plane up and stay higher in the water column. But so something like that has 2 little swimming tails works really well. But also I love throwing, especially if I'm focusing more on fish that are eating shad, something like this that has a boot style tail on it. This is the Z-Man Turbo Fatties, which I helped design and cut down to size. It works really good. It's got a great action to it. But overall, swim jigs are going to be that choice when the fish are really up shallow and around cover. So around laydowns on the bank, that is going to be like probably the #1 scenario for fishing a swim jig, because the swim jig just comes through wood cover very easily. But also fishing around shallow grass, you know, emergent grass or submergent grass works very well. Skipping underneath docks this time of year is going to be a really good way to catch them on the swim jig. Pretty much just pick it up, hit the bank, hit those areas where those fish are going to spawn, and you're going to start getting bit on a swim jig. It's a pretty amazing technique, and it's one that honestly I almost prefer more, prefer more than like a chatterbait this time of year, because it just tends to get more bites, and I feel like it's so much more efficient in really thick cover on the bank. So all right, so the last bait that I want to show you guys that is really important is, you know, the ones that we've talked about so far have been primarily reaction baits, and I just tend to really like to focus on moving fast and finding new water. So that's why those first 3 were reaction baits. But once I find an area, I need a bait that's going to be able to help me pick cover apart in a productive area. Like if I start getting a bunch of buck bites in an area, I know that that's going to be a good spawning bait, and so I want to start to figure out how to get a bigger bite. The swim bait is definitely going to be a good tool to get a bigger bite out of those pre-spawn females, but one of the best baits is also going to be a jig. All right, this is an Arky style jig. This one is the Z-Man CrosseyeZ flipping jig. You know, any type of Arky style jig is going to be a very versatile tool for finding and catching those pre-spawn females. And one thing that I've noticed, especially on this lake recently, and this is something that's very common during March, is I'll go, you know, fish up shallow and catch a bunch of small fish, and then the deeper cover that's close to those areas I was getting bit is holding giants, just holding those big pre-spawn females that are full of eggs, and I'm catching them with that jig. And so that's pretty typical, and that's what this tool really allows you to do, is to pick apart that hard cover specifically that is very close to those spawning areas where the bucks are roaming around. And so on this lake, I've just been, you know, making multiple presentations to every piece of cover that's like in that 2 to 4 foot zone, which in this lake is relatively deep. And a jig is just a really good way to do that and get those bigger bites. So anyways, guys, just wanted to share my thoughts on my 4 favorite baits for fishing in March. I think that they are absolutely some of the best. But that being said, fish what works for you and the lake that you're fishing. That is the biggest key to fishing in my book. So thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you drop a comment below if you have any questions or you want me to do a video on a topic of your choosing. Other than that, I would really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button if you enjoy this content. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching. I'm going to see you out on the water. Trust the process. Good luck in March.